Hey, this is Al. Hello, everybody. Hello around the world. We're starting at 9 p.m. of Philadelphia time in the hopes that some people from East Asia will get to hang out with us, it being morning there. Australia, New Zealand, and the Europeans are sleeping. We're going to miss the Europeans tonight. And the West Coast people, it's good time, 6 p.m., it's dinner time. Cool. Okay, so we're starting at 9. This is going to be slightly more than an hour. It's going to be one of our abbreviated ModPo webcasts because it's late. And I think we did pretty well at going just a couple of minutes over an hour last time. So I want to say hello to everybody here, introduce a special guest, a couple of quick shout-outs, and then we'll go immediately to your questions and comments. We'd love to talk about chapter 9.1, week 8, language poets. We hope you'll focus on those, but of course, we can't stop you from asking whatever question you ask. We can dodge it a little bit. So we have in the Google Hangouts, we have Dave Poplar. Hello, Dave. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
And you seem kind of chipper tonight. Good day today?
Oh no, that's just all facade. I'm actually really tired, but thanks for...
Well, you look great. You don't look tired. Erica Kaufman. How are you, Erica?
Hi, Al. I'm good. How are you?
You were 5 on a scale of 10, but now the number is going up because you get to hang around with your ModPo pals, and I can tell already that you're feeling better. Quick favorite poem this week from the main syllabus, Erica?
Oh, that's hard.
Okay. I can guess if you want.
Do you want to guess?
Yeah, I think I'm going to guess. I think it's going to be My Emily Dickinson, Susan Howe.
That's hard. I kind of feel like it's probably the Harriet Mullen.
The Harriet Mullen, Sleeping with the Dictionary. Okay, good. That means we'll probably talk about it, which is great. Okay, thank you. Max, hello. You're a 7 out of 10. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. It's good to see you. Quick shout out for a poem this week that you really just think it would be great to talk about.
In a restless world like this.
Charles Bernstein, In a Restless World Like This Is, as he says. Thank you. Gabe! Gabe, you're not here with us. It's weird. Hi.
Our public transportation system is on strike. So I'm at home, but not too far away.
So you had a little commute around your apartment, and then you sat back down and put those lovely earphones on, and here you are.
Yep, here.
That's cool. That's cool. Okay, so we have here in the room Jason, the amazing Zuzka. Hello, Jason.
Hello, Al.
Hey, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, I'm happy you're here. Anna Strong is on the phones tonight.
Yeah.
How are you? What's the number? 215-573-9752. We would love for Joe Massie to give us a call tonight. Joe, we know you're out there. You can't hide. We know you've been tweeting. Has Joe been tweeting?
Yes.
What did Joe say?
Joe just responded to my tweet, so he knows to call.
Okay, 215-573-9752. And we have, before we get to the table, we have Chris Martin and Zach Gardner. Zach is wearing a Philadelphia Phillies hat? Okay, he's very recalcitrant. He's very recalcitrant. And Chris Martin is just wearing his usual stylish wool hat with the giant headphones. Thank you both for doing this magic, as always. Here at the table, we have Lily Applebaum. Good evening, Lily.
Hello.
Hello. Emily Harnett.
Hello.
Emily, can we ballyhoo your essay, the new essay?
Sure.
Okay, I've forgotten the name, so you have to tell us what the title is.
I also forgot the name. It's on LitHub.
Come on, what is it? It's on LitHub.
The Horror of Language, something like that.
The Horror of Language. Do some Googling and read Emily Harnett. She's amazing. And we have Davey Niddle. Hello, Davey.
Yeah.
How are you? And you're watching the Twitter feed. Yep. Good, that's good. And we have a very special guest. That was me. We have a very special guest, and that is Kate Colby. Kate, we are so glad that you joined us today.
Thank you for having me.
We're really excited. Yeah. So you were a regular student learner participant. In maybe 2013 or 14, you did ModPo.
Yeah, I did.
And it had an influence on you. How?
I wrote a book.
She wrote a book?
Through ModPo.
That's
It's a book-length essay, critical essay.
It's really exciting. So,
Yeah.
you took ModPo to heart. And
I
you
did. It was very influential.
Thank you. And you a much admired poet, an accomplished poet, and yet you walk into the room and you saw Emily and said, or Anna and said, I'm starstruck. I'm meeting
Oh,
people.
I was.
Anyway, the first caller is going to get a copy of this book called I Mean. And the title poem is 65 pages or 67 pages or something, and each line, almost every line, not all, begins with the phrase I mean. And we did a recent Poem Talk episode about I Mean, and one of the talkers was Joe Massie, the aforementioned, who's going to call us, 215-573-9752. And we have a copy of this book. I have 2 copies of my own. One's marked up, and this one we're going to give away. And maybe you'll sign it for the winner of the book?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So we have other books to give away, and I think I've introduced everybody. Mandana and Eric are here, CTAs, and we have a number of people from English 88, which is the class that we're teaching in this room on Tuesdays and Thursdays that's also involved in ModPo. Couple of shout-outs, and then we'll get right to some questions, some comments. We are looking at the discussion forums. There's a thread in ModPo under Webcast. It says November 2nd Webcast. Here is the place to post comments and questions. Please do it there. We also have Twitter, ModPo Live. If you hashtag ModPo Live, we'll find you. We also have the Facebook discussion, and I'm not sure if anybody's following it. Oh, and there's stuff in the forums. Who's watching the forums?
I've got Facebook.
Okay, I guess I'm watching the forums. Okay. All right. So shout-outs. It's probably Joe. We have a thread called Awkward at Forums that I mentioned last week. If you feel awkward at forums, Kate, go to this thread and you'll be less awkward. I'm not sure actually if that's true, but you'll get to hang out with other people who feel awkward at forums. I highly recommend it. A second thread that could be more active, but is very interesting so far. It's called Heginian: Why is this a poem? Why is this a poem? Max, I'm putting you on the spot, as I often do. Can you say what's a quick answer to why Heginian's My Life is a poem, why it gets to count as a poem? Can you give us a start on that?
That is a good question, and I feel like that's part of the controversy that the language poets and Heginian in particular want to put forth here. I guess, right, there's no line breaks or form, right, that we could point to that would be poetic, but there's a kind of openness, or let's say like an anti, or not necessarily anti, but a kind of challenge to prose that is poetic in a way.
All right,
that's probably where we would start from.
That's a great first one, and I would say the second one, and we'll just pass by this and we'll get back to it if necessary. The second thing is, of course, there's no stanza form, it's prose, but formally the poem is created by the paratactic non-relation, which turn into interesting relations, created by the co-creation of reading. So sentences don't seem to connect, and the difference between A and B produces a C, which is the meaning you're making by putting two things together. And essentially, you're helping Lynn Heginian think about her life as it was languaged. And that is poetic for sure. Okay, third shout out of a thread. The thread is called This is a Heartbreaking, Gorgeous Example of Form as Content, a reference to Bob Perlman's poem, Chronic Meanings, and I highly recommend that one. And that was initiated by, I think, Josh in English 88, and it's got a lot of 88 people in it, and I hope others will join it. Okay, one more thing. Lily Light, who's here in the room. Zach, Lily Light's in the room, cameraman. Lily Light, she's right here. She's over there, Lily Light. There. You're getting her anyway. There she is, yeah. Lily, would you wave? They can't. Okay, there's Lily Light. Lily, the students in the class have a weekly shout-out to somebody, and Lily shouted out to Charles Bernstein for partaking in this week's ModPo discussion forum. It is absolutely incredible, says Lily, to be able to interact on such a human and anonymous way, I guess you meant like virtually, right, with someone we are studying. Read a poem, go to the forums, There he is. I'm so used to reading poems and works written by people who are inaccessible that to interact and learn from the original producer of the work is truly amazing. Davey, I know you care and think a lot about innovative teaching. So can you just say maybe the obvious? What's so good, positive, about Lily Light, a student of literature, a fairly new student of literature, learning that poets who write poems can actually be around. You can actually have a social relationship or an intellectual relationship with them. What's so good about that?
Something that ModPo asks of students is to really be in dialogue with the work. And so the possibility that the person who's creating the work wants to be in dialogue with you really is a way of making this process real, of saying, you know, that reading poems in this way and reading difficult poetry is a necessarily connective process, not just to other people, not just to people sitting in a classroom or people across the world, but that it's connective and dynamic for poets themselves.
Yes.
That nothing in this process is unavailable, not even the poets who are writing the work.
And that poets who might have written a poem in 2002 or 2001, whenever he wrote that poem that we study, here it is, 2016, and Charles Bernstein has lived a life, a very, eventful life since 2001, and has a lot to say when rereading a poem that we are all studying as if it were fresh, as if 9/11 had happened just a year ago or 6 months ago or 5 days ago or whenever it is that he wrote that poem in retrospect. Now in 2016, Lily Light has as much to say about the restless world as Charles does now, reflecting upon it. It's what a former teacher of mine, gone teacher of mine, Terence Dupre, used to call the fate of rereading. So, Kate, quick question on this before we go to the phone. So you write a poem like I Mean, and we talk about it, and you'll listen to that poem talk, and you won't, I predict you won't wince. You won't think they got it wrong. You'll probably actually confess to have learned something from the conversation. How could that possibly be?
Well, that's always true. When you read a review of your work or listen to people talking about your work, all kinds of stuff comes out that you didn't intend
okay.
to put in there. Of course it's okay.
And why is it okay?
That's its raison d'etre.
Really? So that's the reason for its being, that it could be handled by other people and done with by other people and made something of by other people.
Sure, because we want the reader to participate in the meaning making of the poem.
ModPo! Yeah, that's so cool. Thank you, Kate. Anna, who's on the phone?
So on the phone we have Grace calling us from New Jersey. She's a 1.5 first-time ModPoer.
Okay,
and she's really excited to just say hi and really excited to receive Kate's book.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's all yours.
Hi, Grace. Can you hear me?
Oh, hi.
Hey.
Oh my God. I can't believe I'm talking to you.
Yeah, it's me. And I'm really tired, Grace.
Oh, yeah.
In a good way, I'm tired. I spend all night doing the forums, and it's fun. How are you doing with ModPo?
To be honest, I'm not the best student in ModPo
I'm not
right
sure
now.
what a good student or a bad student would mean.
I'm very behind. I've been very hip-hoppy and watching some live webcasts and
Right.
watching much of the videos. It's really fun though. I really like it.
Great. Grace, do you mind? You don't have to answer this because it's not that personal question, but I'm just curious. What do you do? What are your daytimes like? What do you do? Do you have a profession? Are you doing ModPo all the time? What do you do?
Oh, I'm a high school student, so
Great. In a public school in New Jersey?
yeah,
Right.
I'm a senior in high school, so yay.
Whoa, junior year was hard. Senior year's easier?
A little bit. I'm ready for senioritis.
Whoa, it's November, Grace. You're doing senioritis in November. That's
Yeah.
great. So I think it says something really good about your desire to learn, that you would be feeling senioritis and yet be doing ModPo. And excited about getting a book of poetry that for all
Yes,
you
I'm
know
so
you might not
excited.
understand.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
Great. Great. Well, we're gonna get your if Anna hasn't already gotten your address, she's already got it. We're gonna mail this to you, and before we do, we're gonna have Kate inscribe it for you. And if you contact me, which is easy, do you do Facebook? If you do Facebook, you can send me a Facebook message, and I will make sure I can put you in touch with Kate directly, and you guys can have a little discussion, and maybe she can write you a letter of recommendation for your college admission.
Oh wow! I wasn't expecting that, but thank you.
Wait a minute, I think I just crossed the. I think I just crossed the line. Dear Wesleyan, that's your alma mater. Dear Wesleyan, take Grace. Hey Grace, do you want to ask us a question or just say something to any of us since you've sort of gotten to know us a little bit?
I don't really have a question, but I just want to say, like, you guys are awesome, and I'm a big fangirl of this online course. So thank you for like having this, and I really appreciate your dedication and passion. I guess is really awesome.
Gosh, you're just breaking our hearts. This is so good. Yeah, Anna Strong just made. I don't do that very well, but made a little heart. Grace, thank you so much, and please tell everybody at school that you're doing like extra credit ModPo stuff, and maybe you'll get a little slack from your teachers.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, well, take on November 21st, which is Monday of Thanksgiving week, skip school because you'll, right? You can skip school.
Yeah, I'm down with that.
Okay,
yeah.
good. Skip school, borrow a car from mom or dad, and drive to our Final Words webcast. Meet us in person, and then we're going to have lunch afterwards on the 21st, and it would be fun to meet you.
Awesome! Wow. Yeah, I'll get my
All
license
right.
by
All right,
then,
let's hear it
so.
for Grace. Yeah. Thanks, Grace. Good night
Thank
to you.
you. Yeah, you too.
All right,
Thank you.
take care. Bye-bye. 215-573-9752. Wow. Let's get, Jason, would you give the microphone to Jane Levy, please? Oh, Jane, you thought you were going to. Hey, Jane. Yeah, Jason's an expert on turning it on. Okay, well, that will go to the tech guys. All right, good. Jane, come on up to the front and sit at the table. Come on. Let's hear it for Jane. Come on. Oh, yeah. All right, while Jane's coming here, Davey, what's happening in Twitter sphere? Please.
Twitter is not full of questions, but just extremely appreciative. People are very vocally excited about this week, about how lovely it is to be in dialogue with the work. Just lots of appreciation for ModPo on Twitter.
Excellent. In the thread, the webcast discussion thread, we have Matt Corey from Chicago, Max's buddy Matt Corey, who's a CTA. A lot of comment and discussion in the forums this week related to these poems and the difficulty of making meaning and obscurity in general in them. For example, the Perlman poem, Chronic Meanings, about Lee Hickman, without knowledge from outside the poem that he's cutting short the lines in homage to a life cut short. The poem is almost nonsense and certainly not memorable. With that knowledge, it's quite touching, memorable, and meaningful. Others have said that without the class videos, most of this week's poems would mean little to them. Besides our own womp, womp, womp. Besides our own experiences, what other things as readers should we be bringing to these types of poems? Or what strategies can we use on our own when reading these types of work? And then Matt, he hit, send, and then he wrote, and go Cubs go. And then Bob Zane, I can't pronounce Bob's name, Zanizer wrote, can comments be longer than? And that was good, right? James got that right away. What do we want to, what advice do we give, Lily, about context? Like in the case of the AIDS poem, there's no mention except of Lee Hickman. You're going to need to grab the mic to do this. What advice do you have to Matt and others about context? We haven't really dealt with this issue since the very beginning of the course.
Yeah, it's I think basically there's a tendency to feel like if you don't know context and then you find it out later that you've been like cheated of something or tricked in some way. And I feel like we try to push back on that. It's not like we're intentionally withholding any context around poems, but it's like there's a danger to go too far in the other direction where you load up too much context and then the poem only becomes about its context and not about the actual text. So it's kind of a balance. Like you don't want to go too far in one direction, or maybe there isn't really a way to go in the opposite direction. Like, what would be the danger of not knowing the context in the Bob Perlman poem? Like what are the consequences of not knowing that it's an elegy? But if you could get something different, you might not know it's an elegy, but I feel like it would be hard to read it and not know there was some kind of loss being expressed.
It would be a really great thought experiment of a kind that we would never do in English 88 or in ModPo, because we just love the poem so much we want to tell everybody what's going on. But it would be really cool if half the class did a kind of, what do you call that in psychology? The double blind, where half the class read the poem. And I have a feeling, I think there's enough nodding going on, affirming what Lily said, not nodding to sleep, but nodding like yes, yes, that if you would read that poem and know something is missing, something is wrong, something is incomplete. And that may be the only kind of something's wrong, something's missing, who's just left the room, why am I feeling bereft, that you need in order to participate in the work of figuring out how to end his lines. And then finding out that Lee Hickman, who edited Tembler, who was a real friend of the language poets, the San Francisco group, and also the LA group, that he had gotten his diagnosis, and that this was Bob's way of saying, I'm really sorry to hear this. It almost doesn't matter. That sorrow is going to come through. I also think that, Kate, I'd love your reaction to this before we go to, I think it's Joe on the phone. I think the language poets would be the first generation of poets in the avant-garde, the literary history of avant-gardism, at least in U.S. poetry of the 20th century, who would say the criticism, the exegesis, and the context making is also poetic and can sit with the poem somewhat as equal partners. They were the first ones to say, really, commentary in a sort of Talmudic way almost. Commentary and the poem, what's the difference? That's why so many of them are poets and critics also, poets and theorists also. Does that resonate with you? And a second part of that question would be, do you think you've learned that from this generation? I know you thought about the language poets a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of language poetry is about piling stuff on to it. So first and foremost, this poem, for instance, the Bob Perlman poem, is so much about the facility and duplicity of syntax, and he's thwarting the self-completion of language, and that's what language poetry is about. But then, supposing I didn't know that it was an elegy or a pre-elegy at first, once I learned that, it's so cool to note how it has this faltering, failing quality as of a dying person, or, it could also be the difficulty that one experiences when facing a dying person and expressing what one wants to say, or sorrow or sympathy. So those faltering qualities come later with that contextual information, but first and foremost, it's always about the breaking of the syntax.
Yeah.
So the more you pile on, the better.
Yeah. And what you just said, in a very specific response to a question, could also serve as a general overview of some of the ideas that the language poets had about poetry. So thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Let's go to Joe on the phone. Yeah. Hey, Joe.
Hey, Al. Hey, everyone.
How are you?
I'm doing quite well. How are you?
You seem a little low key.
Do I seem low key?
Yeah, take it up a notch.
Okay, I'll try. I'll stand up.
So, how are you? Do you know what? You count, even though you're like a ringer and stuff, you count as someone who should receive a book of poems. And I'll bet you don't have Gabe Ojeda Segei's book of poems, Oil and Candle, do you?
I don't.
This is the
great.
coolest thing. So
Awesome.
Gabe is remote right now, but he is going to. Are you coming to work tomorrow, Gabe?
Yeah, I will be there.
Okay. So Gabe, we'll wait to mail this to you so Gabe can inscribe it for you, and then maybe you guys can exchange, books, and that would be cool. Is that okay?
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Joe, tell us. You know, you yourself appear in ModPo Plus in week 2. That is to say, in the Whitmanian Dickinsonian. You also reappear in. You're in 2 weeks. You're in week 3 as a kind of post-imagist. So I don't naturally think of you as having an automatic theoretical or aesthetic relationship with the language poets. But here you are calling during week 8. What kind of relationship do you have? What have they taught you? What have you learned from them? Why are they important to you if they are?
Well, to tie Sid Portman into this, when I first corresponded with Sid when I was very young, he didn't like the language poets. He'd call them the Lang Gang. And he would, kind of rail against them. And I assume it's just what a lot of those language poetry wars were about. People like Sid were afraid of their traditional lyric eye being obliterated by the Lang Gang.
Mm-hmm.
But then I started reading Ray Armantrout, and that was my sort of entry into so-called language poetry. And then I started reading Ron Silliman, and I just, speaking of imagism, their attention to quotidian detail and just imagery is so beautiful that they do it better than most.
So Ray Armantrout is the perfect answer to the question I asked you. Joe, will you stay on the phone just a bit and hear others' responses to this? So I want to ask, in this order, Erica, Dave, and Gabe, just to say something. Ray Armantrout is not in the main syllabus for week 8 because we already looked at a poem of hers in week 2 as a Dickinsonian, but she very much belongs in week 8, and I believe she appears variously in ModPo Plus. I think she's in week 2, she's in week 3 with the Imagists, she's in week 5 as an anti-Frostian, and she's probably in week 8 as well. She's like taken over the whole course. So Dave, Erica, and Gabe, I invite you each to say one thing about Ray Armantrout's poetry, if you can, if you want to, that would help listeners who've not read a lot of Ray Armantrout to do what Joe suggested, which is to see some part of language poetry in reading Ray Armantrout. Dave, you want to take a stab at it first?
I'll defer for this one.
Okay. All right. Erica, you want to take a crack at that?
I think that's a hard question. I think that paying attention to the way that she uses her line breaks, in terms of like how the poem is working, is something that I would advise people to look to. She creates these exquisite worlds inside of her poem, and she's not doing it through telling a story.
Right. So it's non-narrative and occasionally edges toward looking like a lyric poem, but is fighting traditional lyricism all the time, and does what Joe admires, which is through certain forms of radical condensation. So it's not piling on, as Kate accurately described some of the other giant projects, particularly the prose projects. Gabe, you want to take a crack at this?
Yeah, I actually have a couple of things that
You've thought a lot about Ray Armantrout.
That's true. The first thing I wanted to say is more related to like how you were talking with Joe about images and stuff like that. I think that Ray Armantrout does not trust images as like solid things we can accept and understand as being there and perfectly transmittable between two people, which I think is really interesting. Like for a lot of the 88ers papers in Images Week, I recommended Dusk by Ray Armantrout, which is a great short poem that I think sort of embodies her distrust of images. And the second thing I wanted to say, which is more related to this week specifically, is I think that Ray Armantrout's philosophy throughout her poems is that language and the way we speak builds a sense of self. If you remember, when she was here for Fellows, at Writer's House for Fellows, we made a broadside that had her quote, "A sense of self starts in the mouth and spreads slowly,"
yes,
which is hanging in my room. And that's
is that the thing behind you?
No. This is also Ray Armantrout. This is her poem "Hey," about a receipt blowing in a parking lot.
Can you read that, please?
Yeah, it says, "Sound may be addressed to you, or it may not. A receipt blown crazily across the parking lot was perhaps a moth. It's a good poem.
So Sid Corman would have loved that, right?
sure.
Just to recuperate. Well, Joe's basically said that. I mean, Sid's first reaction to the language poets was they're trying to ruin the lyric I. Ray is dispensing with the lyric I as a consistent thing, but it's there. Anyway, go ahead, Gabe. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to basically say that her understanding that language constructs the self and not the other way around seems integral to a ton of the poems this week. I mean, that seems integral to the Bob Perlman poem that we just talked about, Albany, certainly my life, which seems to be the central theme of my life. So it's a great, she's great to read for this week, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Joe, we're going to come back to you in a second. A couple other points. One of the consistent things across the language poets, including Ray Armentrout, is the concept that there are multiple subjectivities, that when you grow up, you are language, that is to say, you are the object of language that socializes you to use language in a certain way. And Ray Armentrout is such a genius at hearing things and building into poems subjectivities that could be other than her, could be an earlier version of her, could be the daughter of her mother as opposed to the mother of her child, and there's a constant shifting around that's so important. The other thing I would simply observe is that the poetic and personal relationship between Ron Silliman and Ray Armentrout is something that has yet to be explored by critics, because the hundreds and hundreds of written letters and the 5,000 emails that they've exchanged over the years. Ray very rarely writes a poem that she doesn't share with Ron, and then Ron reacts to it. He is a very different kind of poet, and the two of them could collaborate so closely suggests that there's a great alignment in their aesthetic. And I would love to write that book, but Ron won't show me the 5,000 emails. Where are the emails, Ron? You're hiding the emails. Anyway, Joe, how are you? Are you still here?
I'm fired up, Al.
So. Kate Colby's here, and you guys have something of a burgeoning connection of what I described with Ron and Ray. It sounds like you guys are collaborating a lot, right? Or
quite a bit over the last 2 years. Yeah, we trade poems multiple times throughout the course of a week. Yeah,
and that's an amazing thing. And you're very different kind of poets.
Very different, yeah, but there's some similarities, but yeah, quite different. I mean, yeah, especially in our subject matter and ear and, well, pretty much everything.
Joe, I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm sure Kate's not going to appreciate all the attention here, but while we have you, one person received a copy of Kate's book, but it would be great if other people, went out and looked for them. So can you say one or two things to ModPoers who are listening about Kate's work that would recommend it to them? Sorry, Kate.
Well, I think I know Kate is a master at the book-length poem. All of her books are self-contained works, and reading a Kate Colby book is really taking a master class in how the book itself kind of becomes the final poem of the book. I think Robert Frost said something like that, actually, but it's they're beautifully constructed volumes, and I admire that about her work, the long form aspect of it, which is something that I don't do, but admire in her.
How about that, Kate? Thank you. Joe, thank you so much for calling.
You're welcome.
It does, right. Eric said it's something you don't do yet, Joe. Although
You're right, Eric.
It's a bit of a stretch, though. Yeah. Thank you, Joe, for calling. Really fantastic to hear your voice. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Al.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Good night. This is incredible. 215-573-9752. Jane. So we in class didn't talk about sleeping with the dictionary. But why don't we just say that Harriet Mullen is exploring what might be called an erotics of a poet's relationship to the alphabet, which is the tool that she is given to do her meaning making. Just that concept itself is exciting and weird and challenging and innovative. Do you want to say anything about that, as just even if you don't have the poem in front of you and are just thinking about the concept of an erotics of the alphabet. Sleeping with the dictionary?
I mean, it's a little bit bizarre to think about it in a physical sense, but as poets and writers, don't we all like sleep with the dictionary?
Yes, say more. That's great, Jane. Say more, please. And Jason, you're next on this. Sleeping with the dictionary, really?
Like, I mean, that's, I guess, not how I think about it. I think more like playing with the dictionary, but I guess it just shows how intimate this poet believes her interaction with her poetry is.
Yeah.
Which is inspiring to a reader in that sense, because it's like my interaction should be intimate in a similar way. So.
Oh, that's so well put. And what I'm going to do in a second is just play 15 seconds or 20 seconds of Harriet Mullen reading Sleeping with the Dictionary, that piece. It's a rare recording because she doesn't really record a lot. And then I'm going to invite various people, starting with Jason, just to say something about that poem, almost to cheerlead and ballyhoo, you know, others buying the whole book and reading all the pieces. Yeah, what I was going to say, I forgot. So I'm going to play a little bit of the poem here. Chris, we ready?
Is Sleeping with the Dictionary. I wondered if you could say a little bit about that piece and read it for us as well.
Okay. You want me to read it first?
Okay.
All right. Sleeping with the Dictionary. I beg to dicker with my silver-tongued companion, whose lips are ready to read my shining gloss. A versatile partner, conversant and well-versed in the verbal art, the dictionary is not averse to the solitary habits of the curiously wide-awake reader. In the dark night's insomnia, the book is a stimulating sedative, awakening my tired imagination to the hypnagogic trance of language. Retiring to the canopy of the bedroom, turning on the bedside light, taking the big dictionary to bed, clutching the unabridged bulk, heavy with the weight of all the meanings between these covers.
Okay, I'm fading it out, but wow. So Erica, you're going to be next because you said this is the poem this week that, you know, you're most interested in. Jason, say something about Sleeping with the Dictionary. And if anybody here in the next few minutes can comment in a way that connects it to other poems this week, that would be really great because we haven't done that yet. Okay,
All
Jason.
Right. Let's see. I think that having read and taught this book,
it's a very teachable book, isn't it?
Yeah, it's teachable because it in part teaches itself, so the teacher doesn't have that much work to do. But it is a way of really playing in language and letting language. So some of the poems are kind of almost formal experiments where various bit collections or gatherings or magnetized random samplings of language get all pressed together and placed together in different relations. So in a way, it's kind of like some of the poems are like the dictionary's own dreamings of its own kind of subconscious possibilities of what's below. It's because the dictionary is the most beautiful poem of all, we could think. I mean, I urge everyone to go sit and find a dictionary. And like, we don't have dictionaries anymore because I just looked up the word hypnagogic on Google.
And that's not like going through a dictionary because you don't get to have the n+7 accidental relationship of the arbitrary alphabetical order. It's a little like Dewey Decimal, you know, there's nothing quite browsing the library for accidental relationships that were invented by the arbitrary Dewey Decimal, whoever Dewey was.
Yeah, and I think that there's just about this particular book, so it's just a really joyful, jubilant book that is extraordinarily fun to read. And
Yeah,
although
cool.
the poems, you are a unit beyond my mileage, you are a Yugoslavia beyond my mind's eye, you are a Yuhu behind my minor key. Although those might not make sense, they are. Harriet Mullen manages to create these arrangements that are like listening to Rice Krispies or something. Like it's they enable like one's own mind to play, and they're such like a gift.
Yeah.
They're such a gift to readers to I'm trying to think of like what the right exercise is. I don't know. It'd be like being in one of those giant like transparent inflatable balls and like rolling through the world and seeing the world through that perspective.
I knew you were going to come up with that. Not. Thank you, Jason. That's really great introduction to it. Erica, can you say something, especially if you can connect Harriet Mullen's project to some of the other work that we see this week? If you can do that, that would be cool. If you can't, that's fine.
Yeah, I think I can. I'm thinking a lot about the connections between Harriet Mullen and Charles Bernstein or Bob Perelman on the level of thinking a lot about the weight that a single word has in a line. So in Sleeping with the Dictionary, the title is playful, but it's also, she fell asleep with the dictionary. And at the same time, Mullen is really interested in the Oulipo and in different ways that you can manipulate language and create this beautiful thing out of it. And I think that like in some of Charles Bernstein's poems, you see a similar deep care for form, like in A Restless World Like This Is.
Yeah.
I feel the same really intense attention to the word as a unit. Am I allowed to make a plug?
Yes, please.
So I would also, in connection to some of the conversations in the discussion forums around the difficulty of finding a way into language poetry, Belladonna published a book called Looking Up Harriet Mullen, and it's a combination of interviews and letters between Harriet Mullen and Barbara Henning.
Yes.
And the interview section of the book goes poem by poem through the entire book, Sleeping with the Dictionary.
That's great.
And is absolutely wonderful and is really helpful, I think, in terms of just like imagining what one does encountering poetry like this for the first time.
Yeah, that's great. And you were too modest in the plug because you are obviously crucial to the project, the Belladonna project. Oh, you've got it right there. Zach, can we go back to Erica? There it is. Really cool, and there she is. Mm-hmm. Lily, you are a big fan of Susan Howe's take on Emily Dickinson.
Yes, I am.
And I think a lot about Lynn Heginian coming of age in my life, having, for a girl, I think for the girlhood that is in the first sections of that book, it's inappropriate to talk about a specific erotics of language. But clearly she comes of age as a woman being languaged. And then, of course, there's Howe's not eroticizing Dickinson in the biographical way, but eroticizing Dickinson as, for instance, My Life Had Stood a Loaded Gun, which is a very erotic poem. So I'm going to read you a line from Harriet Mullen, and maybe you can go anywhere with that. Okay. Aroused by myriad possibilities, I can almost stop there because it's so Dickinsonian. Aroused by myriad possibilities, we try out the most perverse positions, she in the dictionary. We try out the most perverse positions in the practice of our nightly act, the penetration of the denotative body of the work. Any exit from the logic of language might be an entry in a symptomatic dictionary.
Well, so something that I really picked up from what Jason said earlier was the word play. And I think that the concept of play, but not like not in the sense of like the work is silly or not important. Play is more experimental, but with an air of play, like also with like a child's version of play, where play isn't necessarily just carefree. It can be working things out in play.
Yeah.
So like that's the context that makes sense with Lynn Heginian.
Right.
But so
getting to play with language, getting to play with words,
but also getting to play with gender and sexuality. Like you hear a lot of in that first section of my life, you hear a lot of like very specifically gendered words and things that are actually kind of sexualizing to say to little girls. Like pretty is as pretty does is a very violent phrase to say to a girl in a way, but we don't think of it so much. So I kind of think like in that excerpt you read from Sleeping with the Dictionary, that's kind of that's an adult's voice speaking about the same thing that maybe Heginian's trying to recreate, not in a child's voice, but through the language a child heard. Then with Susan Howe, like I think of it less as erotics, I guess, and more as exploration of gender and sexuality. I'm less interested in the erotics of language part, but I understand that that's a...
Yeah, no, I meant to use it in a broader sense. Her reading of My Life Had Stood a Loaded Gun, which is about the power dynamic of a relationship. If the power dynamic is open, it's going to advantage the unspecified I, the speaker, in that marvelous poem.
And also that if you're writing from a less specified position, you're not limited by the gender expression that you're like assigned by your body. You're like able to explore other ideas and
that's right.
And not just explore in a just try it on for fun kind of way, like inhabit, like with strength is kind of the argument that Susan Howe brings to a reading of Emily Dickinson. It's like, it's not just healing a wound of exclusion or something. It's like very strongly inhabiting an identity.
That's really good. And and the students in the room will particularly appreciate appreciate my framing of it this way. But Susan Howe, Lynn Heginian, Harriet Mullen, those three in particular, but Ray Armantrout, we haven't been looking at those poems this week. They're all going to say, in effect, and Howe's reading of Dickinson's life is particularly strong in this point, that these people do not want what might be called a pre-professional relationship with language, right? Language is not simply going to serve to get you to some place of acquisitiveness and status. That language has to be used in a resistant way, and the resistant way is, as you described it, play, it's out of order, it's Oulipian, it's sleeping with the dictionary, like taking it all and perverse positions with
but there's also
language.
That we try perverse positions. It's like, this not a prescriptive. I forget what word you just said. Not prescriptive. Like more experiment and play.
Yeah. Jane, would you swap with Mandana? Snaps for Jane for sitting up here for so long. Mandana, you don't mind sitting up here? Okay, we have someone on the phone, and Kate. You're our honored guest. Whatever this person on the phone asks, it's all yours.
Oh, hey now. Thanks.
Okay, who do we have?
We have Dave Bender calling us.
Dave Bender.
Yeah, first time caller.
He's really been very active in ModPo. Dave?
Hello?
Hi, Dave. This is Al.
Hi. Hi, Al.
Hey, listen, thank you for everything you've been doing in ModPo. You're all over it, and you're really we can count on you. You're there.
Well, I'm enjoying it. You guys are the ones that are making all this happen.
I don't think that's true, actually. We set up the structure, and you guys come to it. Where are you? Are you in a place?
I'm not actually. I was hoping to get down there tonight.
You're in Philly.
I'm in the Philly area.
He's one of your guys.
Up in Lower Bucks County here. The lower edge of Bucks County.
Lower edge of Bucks, which might as well be a world away without SEPTA these days, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a car.
Okay. Well, I hope you'll come to the
luckily
November 21st, 10:30 a.m. Final Words webcast.
What? That's on a Wednesday, right?
No, it's a Monday. It's the
last.
Monday.
Monday definitely is a good day for me.
Okay, good.
Hopefully, I'll put that on my schedule.
Fantastic.
That sounds good.
We have a poet, Kate Colby, here, and she's just ready to answer whatever question you have or comment.
I don't know her work, and I'm very interested in getting to read some of her stuff. And that's one of the things that I really love about this. Starting with this week, we actually have, live breathing poets. We can have we can hear the breath of a live poet sometimes here.
And I didn't mean to suggest that you should ask Kate a question about her poetry, but she's very interested in the language poets. She spent a lot of years in San Francisco, and that's where the language poets were at a certain point. And I take it you were influenced by, or Kate really understood the language poets before you developed your own poetics?
Them a lot when I was developing a poetic, certainly, particularly Lynn Heginian, her
My Life.
Language of Inquiry, actually, her essays.
Hey, Zach, I'm holding up a book.
I can't recommend that book highly enough.
So it's called The Language of Inquiry, and it's really a collection of essays. And yes, and the essay I was talking to our students about the other day is called The Rejection of Closure, which is a really important thing. Anyway, Dave, do you have a question or concern about the language poets that we can respond to?
The question I have is that we have Ron Silliman in Albany. He uses 100 sentences.
Yeah.
And then Bob Perlman does a similar thing, but it's a little bit more complex, where he has 4-line stanzas of 25 4-line stanzas,
yes,
which also adds up to 100 lines.
Yeah.
And then the kind of interesting thing with Bob Perlman is that if you count the words, it comes out to 25 times 20, which is 500, which is only halfway up to 1,000, which would be the adding the extra 0 to the 100, which I think is an interesting thing with the half sentences. I don't know if that has any particular meaning, but I'm just wondering if there is something to do with, it seems to be a recurring theme or a structure or something of 100 sentences, and I was just wondering if that's a pure coincidence or if there's just something that they all like to write 100 sentences.
I don't think 100 means that much, but although Charles Bernstein's 1969 performance piece is 1 to 100, where he counts and screams to 100, but I think hang on next week, because we're really going to go into computer-generated, aleatory, and very constrained poetry. So this kind of thing is going to be familiar. Kate, why would poets count lines? Why would they do things in hundreds? Why? What's the fascination with doing things so mathematical? Shouldn't poetry just come from your heart and gut and just be what it is?
Poets work a lot with constraint. The language poets in particular worked a lot with constraint, and I think there's a lot of freedom within constraint. I use it all the time. I'm also a kind of would-be Oulipian to some degree. But I also think there was something in it, and with it being an analog of the constructed nature of our understanding of the world as it comes to us through language that they were trying to make. So, they leave out often the connectives and the syntactical and semantic ready-made sense of language, but then they bind it up in these arbitrary constraints to sort of, I think make a further connection to that arbitrary ready-made understanding of the world that language gives to us.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Hey, Dave, thanks for calling tonight.
I'm glad I got through.
I'm glad you did too. We're going to give you a book.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and it's going to be Erica Kaufman's book, Instant Classic.
Oh, that's great, Eric. Thank you.
And I don't know if you can see Erica on your screen, but she's
I do see
she's
her.
smiling.
I love Erica. She's wonderful.
That's great.
She's the best.
We won't be able to. She's too far away to get this signed, but we'll send this to you. And then when you come for the Final Words webcast, maybe we can convince Erica to come down that day and play hooky.
Yeah.
And we can have a big party.
All right. Thank you very
Dave.
much.
Thank you so much.
All right, let me hang up, and maybe somebody else can get a call.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Dave Bender. So that'll be the last call. So we're gonna do some final words now. Mandana, your heart, I think, is in the New York school, but you're into the later poetry too, and the constraint is kind of a fun thing. That interests you?
Oh, it definitely does. But if I can go back to what you said about the New York, I really love the New York and the language poets together. I've been thinking a lot about it for the meetup that's coming up. And
you mean in New York?
Yes.
Hey Zach, how close can you get to our buttons here?
Here, I got one here.
Oh, I don't know. Let's see if he can get close. I don't know if I dare you.
Yeah.
I don't think you can do this.
He can do anything.
He can do anything.
He can do anything.
He's not doing very well at the moment, but it's coming. Oh, it's upside down. But what does it say? ModPo NYC with a little bit of skyline.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. Sorry, Mandana.
No, it's all right. So, when you look at the New York school, you're thinking about location. And then this week is really terrific because you're thinking about dislocation. And they really meet up. They're not opposites, but it matches up really, really well. I was thinking a lot about what Jason was saying about language and the Harriet Mullen poem. And I have either the benefit or the challenge of coming to English already languaged. And it's a benefit.
Fully languaged.
I was fully languaged. Yeah. I was in language in another language. So English was a new way of looking at it. And I think this week is the same thing. If we can kind of let go of our expectations of what language is supposed to be, then this is a pretty terrific week. And also, I used, especially with the Ashbery stuff, I would always say it's alinear and a-narrative. And this week I'm thinking, you know what? It's multilinear. It's multi-narrative. So if we can wrap ourselves around that, it's easier to take the weekend.
That's really cool. We're going to do final words, and they're going to be brief final words, everybody, very brief. What you're going to do is just say something about either a poet or a poem that we didn't talk about in this last hour, or just something that will encourage people to do further, to do more work with the language poets, or to go into ModPo Plus, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be just ballyhooing and cheerleading. It could be a final thought. And we'll also, once Jason has done his, I'm going to ask him to pass the microphone to Bern. Hey, Bern. And just invite Bern to say one final thing. And Eric, if you'll tag on to one of the mics that's available to say a quick final word, that would be good too. Okay, so Anna doesn't know she's going to be first, but now she is. Anna, final thought, please.
I guess I'll just say that I actually had the distinct privilege and pleasure to spend a couple days with Harriet Mullen this summer. And Erica knows because Erica was there. And I guess I just want to say, sort of by way of, been thinking a lot about those couple of days that I spent with her and what an incredibly wise and generous and thoughtful person she is, and her just insane attention to language and the beautiful advice that she gave me about my own work that I've just held on to forever. I guess I would just say that because I've been thinking a lot about that and thinking about the forums this week, please stop. Al's taking pictures and it's terrible.
Easily distracted, are we?
Well, there's a flash.
There's no flash. I don't have a flash.
Oh my God. I'm seeing stars.
I apologize.
Thank you. So I guess I just want to say that I would like to thank Charles and Bob and Ron for being in the forums with us this week, and to Nick next week. And to those of you who haven't had a chance yet to talk to them.
Nick Montford next week. Yeah, we haven't announced that yet. But
well, sneak preview. For those of you who haven't been able to talk to them yet or hear from them yet, at least go back and read what they've said.
Well, Bob's in there today,
Yep.
although I think he sort of forgot today, but he's coming tomorrow.
Yeah.
So Bob's in there.
But whatever, if you have a chance to actually ask them a question, just take that opportunity. As Dave and Lily Light and others have said, we have a chance to speak with people and have people come sit with us, like Kate today. It's just a really amazing thing to get to just have the chance to have these conversations face to face.
That was fantastic, but also long. We want shorter final thoughts.
Well, you distracted me.
Yeah, no, it really is my fault, but what you said was really great, so you get to, okay.
I'm going to be really short.
Yeah, I've never seen that before, but let's.
Well,
No, I love what you
I'm
say
only
all the
5.
time. Listen, I'm the one who's fine staying here till
Speaking of
11.
I'm the one at the end of the alphabet, so whatever.
Well, you're feeling. Does that affect you, by the way?
Oh,
growing
I
up
think
being like, who else is left? Do we have any more cookies for the last guy in the alphabet?
And I was short and small. It's really sad.
Uh-oh,
No,
he's
you don't-
getting a hug. Look out. Oh, my goodness. It's just, wow. Thank you, Eric. All right, Jason, we've just doubled the time on this final thought.
All right. Anyway, my final. I have. Shh. Everyone, quiet. This is really important. I think that the language poets are often thought of, and the way we talk about them has to do with, say, separating them from poets who are expressing their inner selves, and that the language poets are kind of doing this other thing about how language is constructs us and otherwise. But I think it's really important to also think about the way that the work of the language poets, the labor of the language poets, is also something that brings forth a person, brings forth a poet behind the work.
Mm-hmm.
So although it might not be saying, I think this,
Mm-hmm.
the work itself implies the labor behind the act
Bravo.
of making with language.
So important to say, because the criticism of language poetry early, which was huge, was it's impersonal, it's inhuman, it's inhumane, it's got no people. Oh yeah, that's what everybody said. All right, you're passing the mic to Bern, and we're going to go to Dave Poplar, then Erica, then Max, then Gabe for quick final thoughts. Dave.
Just an observation here. All the poems and the poets up to this week, it seems like they were really writing their poems and using form to reinforce and communicate their messages. But this week, it's as if the poets are writing in form. They're creating the form, and they're creating their message in the form. And I think they're pushing it that much farther. It's really interesting to see.
Yeah. And 88ers, we had this conversation in class the other day. I think somebody said, well, aren't they using form? Well, Dave just talked about the way in which they're using form in a new way by inventing forms rather than using derived forms. Erica, final thought.
I want to go back to what somebody was saying about process. I think maybe it was Kate. And I'm thinking about Harriet Mullen, and I'm also thinking about the idea that one way to approach the poets of this week and the poets that we'll be dealing with next week is to think about the experience of reading language poetry or aleatory poetry as, these are writers who, in a lot of ways, have demystified the creative process and taken away that, thing where you think that something special has to happen so you can write a poem. They democratize the creative process and turn it into something that is open to anyone and everyone, and it turns poetry into something that's much more of an inclusive act.
Such an exciting thing, which is one of the reasons why so many people encounter this supposedly difficult poetry and feel inspired to do their own writing, because they've been given the tools and the methods and the procedures, rather than the mystification of a poet like Frost, who will come and tell you that he waited for the muse and you have to be in a snowy woods on a certain night and et cetera. And not to put that down, that's a sort of a mystical, inspirational, romantic notion. But so people do write. They're inspired to write because of this. So that's a really good point. Max, final thought.
I'm going to recommend again Bernstein's In a Restless World Like This Is. It's sort of the least languagey poem for this week, but that's not the reason why.
But it's
just
plenty
such a-
languagey, because the poem never gets anywhere. And
Sure, but it's
in a way, yeah.
Yeah, that's true, but it's sort of less interested in those early problems and questions of the language poets.
Yeah, it's a
I
later
would
poem.
say. But it's such a beautiful account of the utter erosion of our sense of this sort of stability and solidity of our institutions, which happened after 9/11.
Yes.
And which, now a week away from the election, I think is something that's, at least personally, really on my mind as we face an absolutely horrifying election. So, yeah, Bernstein's poem is absolutely
Okay, great.
My recommendation for the week.
Yeah, and I think the students who are maybe a little tired this late, but there's a bunch of nodding going on because we talked about that poem in class and it had a powerful effect. Gabe, final thought?
Yeah, my final thought was also a cheerlead. I just wanted to plug Robert Grenier's Sentences, which in its physical form is 500 index cards, but
In a box.
good luck finding a physical form of it. There is an online version of it, though, that recreates the effect of the 500 index cards. It's really good. It's on the ModPo Plus syllabus, and super influential for the poets that we've read this week, who were friends of Grenier's, who are friends of Grenier's. And I think influential for a lot of the poems that will come later, and so underread.
Yes.
Like nationally, it's really underread and underappreciated. But
Great,
it's so
great
good.
book. It's called Sentences, and it's a box of 500 cards, and it's in ModPo Plus. Robert Grenier, who said famously, "I hate speech," which we'll talk about another time. Mandana, final thought.
Really quick one. Going back to what Lily said about intent play, read the Lydia Davis in ModPo Plus. It's
Yes,
great
and
intent play.
We've just added a Lydia Davis, and we haven't done a video on it yet. And so I know we're all excited about Lydia Davis being a Writers' House Fellow this spring.
And Max and Lily did a great few weeks on Lydia Davis, and you are doing another great coming up. So read
Yes,
Lydia.
that's really very exciting. Okay, Lily, final thought?
Yeah, I just think I kind of want to give a plug to My Life by Lynn Haginian because I feel like of the texts on the syllabus, it might be one of the longer ones, but I think it really rewards a close read and even like reading out loud. For me, that's the one that is the most exciting, like you were saying before, it inspires you to write about your own life. Or I think a toss-up between Lynn Haginian and Ray Armantrout show me personally a way to think about living and writing poetry in a way that like liberates you from, like collects language that you hear and overhear and that's like projected onto you, or that you remember someone weird saying to you when you were like 9 and you're like, why is that stuck with me forever? But I guess it's important. As like getting that to count as poetry and like putting a work behind that, that's been important to me. So
Fantastic. Thank you, Lily, for that plug. Bern, final thought, quick.
Hello. So we've talked a lot in ModPo about how words aren't enough sometimes to encompass some of the feelings we have. And so what I was really struck by with the language poets, particularly with In a Restless World Like This Is, and also with the poem for Lee Hickman, was just how those two poets were able to use form to achieve something with language in such a difficult situation. And that's something that like I wouldn't begin to try. So
Very cool. Thank you, Bern. And while you're passing the mic to Eric, let's turn to Emily Harnett for a final thought.
I loved what Mandana had said about these poems being kind of multilinear and multi-narrative. And and it really strikes me just looking at the poems for the week. These are like fat, long poems, some of the longest poems that we read in this entire course, and all experimental poetry, and probably, especially in an ironic way, the language poetry gets accused of being kind of harsh and pared down and emptied of all the kind of like warm, familiar, accessible stuff that a lot of readers hope for in poetry. But if you look at it, there's so much there, and it isn't so much that something is emptied out as that things are kind of multiplied and fragmented and kind of distributed in different ways. So that's worth remembering.
Thank you, Emily. Davey, final thought?
Two quick plugs for further reading outside of but very much in conversation with the ModPo syllabus. One is an essay that's online. You can Google it. It's an essay called Language, Poetry, and the Lyrics Subject, Ron Silliman's Albany, Susan Howe's Buffalo. It's an essay by Marjorie Perloff. And she has really smart things to say.
Say the title again.
Language, Poetry, and the Lyrics Subject, Ron Silliman's Albany, Susan Howe's Buffalo. I'll post a link to Twitter also.
Yeah, and it's the best essay, and certainly the first one I read, which explains the whole question of non-stable nomadic subjectivity. And that was a new concept for a critic to be dealing with at the time she wrote that.
Yes, that essay came out in '99 and is a great essay and is helpful for thinking about the lyric guide that we sort of started thinking about with the way that Whitman uses it and the way that it erodes in some of this work, which is both in conversation with things we've read and also pushing against them. And then my very favorite poet is a language poet, and I just want to plug her work. Leslie Scalapino is a really incredible language poet, and her work is just spectacular and strange and frenetic, and does a lot of the energetic fractal things that language poetry does beautifully.
Great.
And go read her work.
Your job is to pick out a Scalapino poem for us to do a video on, and we'll add it to ModPo Plus because I think it's a great idea. You
Cool.
keep coming up with those.
Awesome.
All right. Eric, quick final thought?
I love that we had a high school student call in today.
Grace, yeah.
Yes, I want to talk just for a moment to the teachers and the learners. Daniel Robert Block tomorrow is going to be teaching the opening lines of Shelley's Prometheus Unbound to his 10th graders at the King's School in Connecticut. It is not easy to teach big, difficult poetry in schools. I know there's a lot of constraints of the wrong kind, not the kind that you choose, but the kinds that are imposed upon you. But brave teaching encourages brave learning. Teachers who are brave enough to teach these things, who can go into the ModPo syllabus, find things and bring them to the students, are going to find brave students who are going to do amazing work for them. I want to turn around to the English 88 students behind me and say hello. I want to talk about bravery bravery extending into being an undergraduate. I know you guys are very busy. I know you guys work a lot. There is a ton of stuff on this campus and on campuses all over the United States which have nothing to do with your curriculum. Every time you reach out to those places, you're going to find amazing things for you. I myself run a kind of graduate level seminar on modernism, which takes place in the spring term, and we have some spectacular faculty, both from here and from other places, and poets, including many of the poets on this curriculum, who come and teach that course. You are always invited into the room. You should never feel afraid to enter the room. What you have to say is valuable, and what you have to say will change what happens next. The first thing is knowing that courses like this, teachers like Al, give you permission to be present. I'm so glad that you're present. I've learned from you today. Thank you for being here, and keep being brave.
Thank you. Snaps for Eric and the students. Thank you so much. Kate Colby, thank you so much for joining us today as our special guest. What fun.
Thank you for having me.
And the first time we're meeting, and it's been such a pleasure. Let's hear it for Kate Colby, please. Kate, your final thoughts? You're now a real ModPovian. You took the course, now you've been on a live, now you're a featured guest, we're giving away your books.
Just related to what I earlier called the pylon, I was subsequently thinking about what that does, that kind of exhaustive, durational project, like My Life or all of Silliman's work and My Emily Dickinson, and thinking how it's cool that all of that pylon of language and material and ambient, well, not always ambient, but of information creates a negative space for the self that's opposed to the kind of, more conventional language that we typically plug ourselves into and define ourselves with. So it's kind of neat to see all this stuff piled around the outline of the self.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kate, once again. Thank you for spending the day with us. I just want to conclude with a few lines from a poet, Elizabeth Willis. Liz Willis. It's a poem, just a few lines from a poem called Survey. 51% or 52% of the ModPo people signed up for this course this year are from outside the United States, so 48% are in the United States. So for those of you, and many of you are tuned in tonight, who are scratching your heads about the electoral season, some of you understand it deeply and well. I'm not saying you shouldn't understand it or don't understand it, but this poem for me really says well what so many of us worry about. And just a few lines from it, it was sort of randomly chosen. I used to worry I'd never get warm again. They worry their cul-de-sac will hide a human cloud with a cart full of cans. I worry the neck was broken, but the body lived. I worry the island is getting farther away, that the song won't stop, and so we'll never really hear it. I worry the grass won't green again. I don't worry that words will fail me, but that I will fail words. I worry the wheat won't tassel, that the weak things will become weaker. I worry there is not enough modern pollen for the ancient bees. I worry the shoelace, its oncoming train. I worry about gunpowder and tiny bits of nails and the liquid softness of the eye. I worry that the bus will leave 5 minutes early, that there will be no place dry to sleep. I worry these drugs are just experimental. I worry the window can't be opened. I hope the tunnel doesn't collapse while I'm beneath the East River. I think we all need a vacation. I wish that I were an oceanographer like my father, or the one he could have been. I wish that time could be turned off like a machine. I hope eventually we can speak freely of everything. I'd like to graduate from the United States of plastic. I'd like to face the future as if it were a person. I'd like to touch it and still come home for dinner. I want to introduce you to my boat. I think that everything can't wait till tomorrow. I hope you're awake when I get there, that you'll be with me at the end. Liz Willis, a poem called Survey. That's the end of our webcast tonight. When we see you again next Wednesday to talk about chance operations and aleatory, random, crazy poetry, we have been done by one day with this election season, and maybe we'll all be into chance operations and aleatory poetry in a special kind of way. Not. This has been Al from Philadelphia, Jason, Anna, Dave, Erica, Max, Gabe, Mandana, Lily, Emily, Davey, Kate Colby, and everybody else who's here, including people I didn't name. Thank you so much. And Chris and Zach, always, for your amazing work. And we will see you in a week. Please stay with us, ModPo, till the end. We'll see you next week.